Lynch from Ireland. I think it's Dublin, isn't it? Yes, please.
Hello. Hi. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to tell my son's story. I'm not a teacher or a doctor. I don't have any statistics. I'm just a mammy. Our lives changed 2 years and 6 months ago. I'm not going to cry. We had the most beautiful 14-year-old boy. Never sick. He had his tonsils out when he was 3. That was the only thing that was ever wrong with him. When he was 12 years old, he made the transition from primary to secondary school, which he found a little bit difficult, like most children do. Jake loved routine, and this was out of his comfort zone. So the school intervened, and they thought it would be helpful if he saw a counsellor. So she referred him to a psychologist, and Jake continued to see the psychologist for 2 years, once a month, sometimes once maybe every 3 to 4 months. I thought occupational therapy or cognitive behavioural therapy would help Jake, and I asked the psychologist would that be possible. So in January 2013, she made an appointment for Jake to see her colleague, which I thought was an occupational therapist. We never had any dealings with mental health. I didn't know anybody in the mental health system, never knew anybody on antidepressants, anything. I was in work that morning, so my husband John took Jake to the appointment. It lasted all of 10 minutes, and he came out with a prescription for Prozac. There was no consent form, there was no explanation what Prozac was, and the reason he was given it was to get him through his exams. Jake had an IQ of 153. He had a condition called mild Asperger's. It's not an illness, it's a condition that no tablet will ever fix, and he was quite happily living with it. He was a normal teenager. He was going through adolescence, he was sitting exams. It's just anxiety, that's it. After 6 days, Jake had his first reaction. He walked out of an exam halfway through, which was highly unusual. He also had a meltdown, which was highly unusual that night, which lasted about 3 hours. I thought of putting him in the car and taking him to our local A&E, but I thought they would think I was neurotic because he was sitting his exams. I never thought that medication could make you do that, because the doctor had gave it to us, a psychiatrist. So they wouldn't harm my child. Do no harm. That's the oath they've taken. So Jake wasn't monitored on Prozac. The dosage was doubled without her seeing him again. She gave a rolling prescription to the pharmacist, who our local pharmacist didn't think to include a patient information leaflet with the Prozac. On day 46, Jake shot himself dead with a .22 rifle, while his daddy and I were sitting downstairs. He had no history of suicide ideation, no history of self-harm, no history of depression. As I said, the only diagnosis they managed to make on him was mild Asperger's. This can never be fixed, ever. I was one of the most overprotective mothers in the world, so if it can happen to my child, well, there for the grace of God was anybody's child. But what we're left with is fighting the Irish system. Because of Irish psychiatry, my Jake is gone. Despite Irish psychiatry, I'm standing here telling the story. But before I finish up, because I don't have an awful long story, because we're still in the middle of Jake's inquest, they have put us through the ringer, bringing all kinds of barristers and statistics in. We are not allowed to speak about Jake in Ireland because of prescribed medication. If my son had been on cocaine, I would have been allowed to speak about it. I would be behind bars. Now, in my eyes, the prescribing psychiatrist should be charged with manslaughter. I never signed a consent form. We were not informed. That is what this is all about, informed consent, how dangerous these medications are, and stop medicating our children. Let's let them be children. They have problems, you know, we have sadness, it's called life, and you pick yourself up when you get on. You don't just give them a pill. But just before I finish up, 3 weeks ago, we found an email belonging to Jake, which was wrote 24 hours before he died. I'll just read the first couple of lines. He had a little girlfriend in America who he loved very much, and he wrote to her. Just starting to feel down again, honestly. The anti-anxiety stuff is actually an antidepressant, which they didn't tell me. Probably doesn't make much of a difference, but I feel like I'm drugged to the point that it suppresses everything bad until it all suddenly spills out. And they were my son's drug little mind's words 24 hours before he died. Thank you very much for allowing me to tell Jake's story. Thank you.
Peter Gotchi was actually very mean to me last night, and he said that not one of you is going to understand what I'm about to say anyway, so I hope you can. Hi, I'm Leonie Fennell from Ireland, and I'm here to tell you about my son Shane. Firstly, I cannot tell you how excited I am to be here today in the same room as Peter Gotchi and Robert Whittaker. There are actually quite a number of my heroes present here today. There is Mr. and Mrs. Antidepressant, who have done Trojan work in documenting SSRI-induced deaths in the UK, and my fellow speakers whose stories you will read in Peter's book, including my Irish friends Stephanie and John. I have so much respect for you all, and you should know that it makes this life we now lead just that little bit easier. I'm here to tell you about Shane. Shane was my handsome, happy, friendly and very caring son. He was my eldest child and had younger siblings that he loved to distraction. They had a mutual admiration society going on. Every weekend, Shane would come home from college to take his brothers to the beach or to the cinema. He would wind them up, tittle them, annoy them, love them, sing inappropriate songs to them, and teach them random skills like the distracting hand. This is where he would distract them with one hand and then he would tittle them or slap them with the other, leaving them in hysterics. He would then leave for college, leaving me to calm them down and clean up the mess he left behind. In 2009, Shane broke up with his long-term girlfriend, Jen. He was 22 years old and was a final year student of theology and Irish. While parting ways was his idea, very soon afterwards Shane regretted breaking up. At this stage, his girlfriend had moved on and was seeing someone new. Shane found that difficult, but to take his mind off his love life, he decided to do some travelling. He went to stay with a cousin in Thailand and then on to Australia, but he missed his family and friends too much and came home early. I then persuaded him to see a doctor, thinking that maybe he might be suffering from more than just heartache. I thought it could be this depression that seemed so prevalent everywhere. I even have a vague recollection of discussing with him that it might be a chemical thing. I had totally bought into the idiocy that pharmaceutical companies and psychiatry has pushed on us, the chemical imbalance fraud, although I wasn't to discover that till later. Although Shane had little previous history with doctors, he agreed to go. This proved to be the worst decision of our lives. For his heartache, Shane was prescribed a month's supply of Lumbex citalopram, also known as Cyprimen Benzolexa, and began taking it as prescribed. In Ireland and other countries, the patient information leaflet states, "Tell your doctor immediately or contact the nearest hospital if you have distressing thoughts or experiences during the treatment." Bearing that in mind, on day 3 of taking citalopram, Shane phoned the doctor to say he didn't think that the drug suited him, that he had a swollen tongue and the drug was making him feel weird. He wrote on Facebook that he thought he had the flu. Despite what the patient information leaflet says, the doctor told Shane to keep taking the drug, to persevere with the treatment. Instead of improving, he began to get very restless and agitated. He couldn't keep still, was insistent on constantly moving, which was very unlike him. I later found out that this was most likely drug-induced akathisia. On day 5 of taking citalopram, Shane took the remaining 23 pills altogether in an attempted overdose. He awoke the following day and phoned me. I picked him up and brought him home. He looked and acted like a person suffering from Parkinson's disease. His mouth was shaking and he seemed really awkward on his feet, just like I am now. I insisted that he went to see another doctor, this time our family doctor. Shane explained everything to the doctor, and again, despite what it says on the patient information leaflet, she prescribed the same drug again, albeit in a lower dose. It never occurred to me that the treatment could harm him, and I still assumed the doctor knew best. Shane took the slower dose as prescribed, but got more and more restless. On day 17 of taking citalopram, Shane, my handsome, kind, gentle son, went to the supermarket and bought a block of knives. He then went to where Jen and her new boyfriend were staying and attacked them both, killing the young man with a single stab wound. Jen and this young man's brother were also injured but survived. Shane then went into the garden and stabbed himself 19 times, ending his own life in the worst conceivable way. So that was the sum total of Shane's experience with an antidepressant. 17 days in death. 3 doctors interacted with Shane in those 17 days, and not one diagnosed him with anything other than heartache. Yet all saw no issue with prescribing him mind-altering drugs meant for moderate to severe depression. What followed Shane's death was equally baffling to our family. Lundbeck, the maker of citalopram, in a statement to the Irish media, denied that citalopram could cause suicide or violence. The Irish Psychiatric College collectively said the drugs are safe. Don't be ridiculous, woman, your son was at fault, not the drug. They gave statements and wrote letters in the media denying that these drugs were dangerous. What was more telling, they involved themselves before, during and after Shane's inquest. One of Ireland's leading psychiatrists, Patricia Casey, who incidentally has been a paid speaker for Lundbeck for almost a decade, turned up with her legal team uninvited at Shane's inquest, offering her services to the coroner. She said she was there on behalf of Irish psychiatry. Knowing without a shadow of doubt that the drug had caused this mammoth shift in Shane's personality, I had shamelessly prostrated myself at the mercy of world-leading psychopharmacologist and international prescription drug expert, Professor David Healy. After considerable begging on my part, he eventually agreed to do a report on Shane's case and appear as expert witness to the coroner's court, free of charge, I might add. Professor Healy testified that these particular antidepressants can cause a person to become both suicidal and homicidal. The jury then rejected the suicide verdict and returned an open verdict. Following the inquest, we were all stunned when outside the coroner's court, Professor Casey expressed her displeasure at the verdict to the waiting media. She said there were aspects of the evidence which the college took issue with. I wondered who she was representing that day, Irish Psychiatry or Lundbeck. The president of the college then made another statement in the Irish media defending SSRIs. Incidentally, through a Freedom of Information request, I found out that this internal college email was also sent from within the college to Lundbeck. Yet despite the efforts of Irish Psychiatry, the verdict still stands. It seems to me that the Irish College of Psychiatry used their own version of the distracting hand that day and muddied the waters just enough to curtail the media's reporting of the dangers of SSRI antidepressants. Even Shane might have been impressed. So there you have it. Have I, as Shane's mum, done enough to warn others? Have we all, as outspoken advocates for informed consent, made any impact on future generations? Have we screamed enough that the chemical imbalance that we so believed in is just plain fraud? More often than not, when I'm quoted in the Irish media on the dangers of antidepressants, I'm referred to as killer's mother says. If that is what it takes to warn others that these drugs are highly dangerous and not the harmless little sadness neutralizers that the drug companies portray, then I'll reluctantly accept this title. Not for any noble attempt at martyrdom, as Tony will tell you, I'm no Mother Teresa, but for a young man who was known by his tutors as An Creamore, Irish for the big heart, and for another young man who should also be alive today. People ask me what I could have done differently. I would never, ever, ever have brought my son to the doctor. If I hadn't, both young men would be alive today. Furthermore, I now research any drug given to my children, prescribed or over the counter. We deserve to know all possible outcomes. Informed consent is a basic human right. And remember, as Shane would have said, always beware of the distracting hand.